Hello. Um, it's me again, Jason. Uh, this should be a short one. I just wanted to put out a quick video on a subject that I rarely discuss, which is musicals. Um, Nobody would be horribly surprised to find out I'm pretty lukewarm on musicals as a role. Things like there are moments in the classic ones, the sort of Rodgers and Hammerstein, that I can, oh, that's neat. In nice big, especially in the movies, big musical numbers, can be fun. There's a couple of good songs and My Fair Lady, stuff like that. But by and large, I can kind of actually like the '30s musicals more, the Bugsy Berkeley and stuff like that. Um, but anyway, yeah, it's a lot of people doing a lot of stuff that isn't really that interesting to me. But there are two musicals that I have been very enamored with ever since my early childhood. As long as I can remember, I've loved these two musicals. One of which is Jesus Christ Superstar. The other is the Rocky Horror Picture Show or Rocky Horror Show, depending on the production. Um, you would be surprised; these two seem quite dissimilar. I think they're actually more alike than unalike. Uh, they are both rock and roll musicals. They both premiered on the London stage in the early '70s. They both involve uh, men who die at the end, betrayed by someone they were close to. Think about it; it's kind of true. Um, uh, Frankenfurter hung out with more women than Jesus, um, interestingly. But whatever. Um, anyway, they're both. I think of a time. They're both very strange, subversive works. Jesus Christ Superstar. Oh, it was an earthquake. Good grief. Jesus Christ Superstar. I have both the original London and the film soundtrack. Um, uh, with a lot of overlap between the two casts. Um, uh, Different Jesus and Judas on this, but Pilate's the same. Mary Magdalene. Um, I believe Caiaphas is the same. Um, this one is a little more interesting because it's it's got some session musicians from the late '60s, early '70s scene who would go on to be in bands like Deep Purple and Mountain and stuff like that. Um, it's interesting. It's Hamilton gets all this, you know, oh, it's race conscious casting, blah blah blah. You know what? Jesus Christ Superstar was half a fucking century ago. Okay, get over yourself, Hamilton. We're sick of it. You're on notice officially. Jesus Christ Superstar did it way ass back when with a racially diverse cast um, of especially of parts that until that time, whatever their historical truth, but until that time had been pretty much exclusively played just by white people. Max von Sydow played Jesus, for fuck's sake, and you could read through that guy. He was so white. Um, you know what? So again, fuck you, Hamilton. Anyway, it's. I first saw the movie, and I saw it probably 100 times as a kid. That I remember they used to show it uh, during Easter break. That sort of, I don't know what you call the Saturday between Good Friday and Easter. Okay, Saturday. I don't know. But they used to show it that weekend the same way they'd show Ten Commandments or Greatest Story Ever Told or whatever. and it would be a late night showing for some reason because it was hippies. So I remember that and Godspell would be on a lot. Godspell is closer to just torture of the scrotum. It's a horror. Oh, just one of the few times I've ever heard myself say out loud, "I want to punch Jesus." He's a mute in sort of Mork from Orc suspenders and a Superman crest T-shirt. I just um. Anyway, I used to show it, and it's I like the sort of Manson family ish, hippie van. A bunch of hippies spill out, and they're in the desert, and let's put out a musical in the desert, man. Um, but it's actually Israel and um, around the time of the Yom Kippur War, um, as opposed to the 7 Day War, the 8 billion other wars they've had. It was around the time of the Yom Kippur War, and it's a cool movie. It's got great songs. There's great music. There's guitar on it. It's not. This isn't Wicked or that sort of dental music, sweetness. It's rock music. It's surprisingly rocky for Andrew fucking Lloyd Webber, who wrote Cats and Phantom of the Opera and all that pukey crap. But this is actual, put on the song of Simon the Zealot, especially the film version, which has a stronger, more sort of 70s soul singer taking the part. So we would watch that over and over, and loved the King Herod song, of course, and it was a staple of my childhood. It's something that I think also holds up. Um, when people look at me sideways when I mention it, I'm not ready to die in defense of Jesus Christ Superstar. I can understand why some people would be put off. I have an ex who watched it with crossed arms, just sort of dug in like that. And I appreciate for people who were raised in theologically inclined households that sort of propagandizing. They have a much thinner skin for than free spirits like me. And also inexplicably knowing the musical backwards and forwards um, puts me at. I've found in discussion with religious people puts me as fairly competent in in my knowledge of the New Testament, which is kind of strange. But I found my familiarity with the high priest, Caiaphas and blah blah blah. Okay, yeah, your stuff. No, I don't. It's from a fucking musical. Um, anyway, so that's Jesus Christ Superstar. At the same time, um, I was quite young the first time I heard of Rocky Horror Picture Show, the film version of Rocky Horror Show, which was the original stage name. And I remember I was in the Homewood Theater, which was one of the older theaters in the sort of decaying suburbs I grew up in, and it was the one that would host it weekly. And I was there to see. I think I saw the trailer a couple of times. It was either when the first time was either when I saw Bugsy Malone, the old child gangster film, which I saw at that theater, or the marathon of Peter Cushing Doctor Who movies, which I saw there. I think it probably Bugsy Malone because that was before Doctor Who first premiered in Chicago. There's no reason I would have been going to see the Peter Cushing Doctor Who movies until I had been introduced to Doctor Who in, I'm going to say 77, whereas Bugsy Malone I know was 76. Anyway, I know I saw it both times. I saw the trailer quite a few times, and it worked in this sort of old palatial theater. Um, and then when I was quite young, I was about 11 or 12, um, a friend of mine and I did manage to bullshit our way into a midnight showing, and my life was changed. It was years and years and years until I'd see it again. Um, Young people need to realize Rocky Horror Picture Show was not actually available for commercial home viewing until the 25th anniversary, which was um, not the 25th, the 15th. I had to do my math. The 15th anniversary, which was 1990. That was when it was released on video cassette. But it had not been available before then. There were these shitty bootlegs you'd see. There was the audience participation album, which unfortunately I don't have anymore, which was basically listening to the movie with the audience reacting, which was a lot of fun. Um, and then various other recordings and stuff. But you couldn't actually watch the movie at home. People didn't think you'd want to, because they assumed, I think wrongly, that the appeal of the film was the audience participation. I enjoy the audience participation. I mean, it's a great experience. But I actually really I like the musical. I like the story. Um, I like the performances. There are some really great songs in it. There's some mushy songs, some not great songs, but it's a cool the combination of 50s rock and roll and classic B movie B sci-fi movies with um, kind of freak culture. I mean, it is of course a mainstream commercial film about queer culture, but just freaks in general, sort of outsiders. And I think that became this rallying point. I'm sure, for gay kids my age, it must have been, a light in a very, very dark tunnel that was, say, the 1980s. Um, but, even as somebody who's not themselves gay, just the celebration of being a fucking freak. Anybody that felt like a freak in the sort of bland, conformity of Reagan's America, there it was, man. So I have three Rocky Horror recordings. Like I mentioned, I don't have the audience participation anymore, but I do have the original Broadway, not Broadway, the original London show, which is really, really neat. Um, Interestingly, a lot of these people actually end up in the film. Tim Curry as Frankenfurter. The composer of the work, Richard O'Brien, is Riff Raff. Magenta is still played by Patricia Quinn, and she also plays the usherette in this. And then Little Nell as Columbia, who's Australian. The other parts, Eddie and Janet and Brad and the narrator and the Professor Scott and Rocky, those are all played by different actors. But still, it's great. It's sort of in the embryonic stage in a lot of ways at this point. It's a much smaller band. There's not the sort of lavish orchestration you get with the film, but it's fun. It's raw, and at points it's pretty rocking. The next version, I've had this for a billion years. This is the producer Lou Adler saw Rocky Horror in London, and he brought it to LA. At the time, he could not bring the whole cast, so he just brought Tim Curry, and it even has the sort of special starring Tim Curry, and then a lot of people that I'm not really sure who they are, and the premiere of Meatloaf, whose name is actually two words on this one, whereas it's just Meatloaf, like one word, two syllables on that one. I don't actually know which is right. I should look it up. But this is good. This is sort of a nice halfway point The production is a little bit more developed, um, but it's a great live recording. And then finally, this was a relatively recent reissue. Well, not that relatively recent because it's the 40th anniversary, which would have been 2015. So it's an issue. It's was released within the last 5 years, and it is the entirety of the music from Rocky Horror Picture Show on 2 discs rather than one. There is the soundtrack that we all had as a kid. You'd know the cover if you saw it. That was the only official Rocky Horror Picture Show soundtrack. The problem was it cut like half the songs. It didn't have. Um, I'd have to look up to remember all of them, but I know it didn't have sort of Damocles. It didn't have Once in a While, um, Planet Schmanet, quite a few. I think Superheroes wasn't on there. Quite a few because it was they had to condense over an hour's worth of music into a single platter. So they did it at the loss of certain songs. This is also both this and the London. The vinyls are red, so it's spooky and sexy at the same time. But if you were to buy a Rocky Horror Picture Show soundtrack, I'd definitely say this sounds amazing on vinyl. It just sounds so fucking good. Um, so obviously, if you have the capacity to play vinyl or are thinking about it, go out and get a damn record player. It's enough with the clouding and the streaming and all the sort of weather nature sounding crap that's ironic because it's as far away from anything nature as possible. I'm going to go stream from the cloud. No, you're not. You're going to go listen to gigabytes and binary code. That's what you're going to go listen to. Don't call it streams and clouds and rainbows and prancing deer and all that shit because that's not what you're doing. You're listening to a bunch of computer noise. Um, so anyway, those are the two musicals I love. They have both have a special place in my heart, both for nostalgic reasons, um, but also just because they sort of mean something. I think there are other musicals that I have an attachment to that maybe I was a little bit older, so I don't have the same depth of attachment. Cabaret, I mean, I love the show Cabaret, for instance, but I don't have the depth of connection with it, or The Boyfriend. God knows I love the movie Phantom of the Paradise. Um, Somebody mentioned Forbidden Zone today. That's obviously a pretty neat work, but um, those two really like if I was on an island and you said, "Oh, you can only bring recordings from two musicals," which I don't know why you would have those parameters, but wherever this island is, where you're allowed to bring a finite number of very specific things, uh, I would, with those rules set, I would bring those two. I there's no other musical I think I need to see again. Um, King and has some neat songs, um, but Hamilton. But it is what it is. So that's it. That's my update on musicals. I am sorry that my hair is getting worse and worse and worse. I am probably about a week away from simply just ordering a pair of clippers and shaving my head. I've noticed more and more of you are doing that. I am unfortunately going to have to soon because my the colic on the left side of my head is starting to grow an identity of its own. This is very soon going to turn into an episode of Outer Limits, where it eventually takes over and becomes the primary person, and my face sort of disappears into the mists of time. That's it. Monday is Memorial Day. I'm sure I'll post something else, not Memorial Day related, because what am I? But there you go. That killed 20 minutes. Have a good day.